For decades, Bing Crosby was America's golden voice, the man who shaped modern music long before Sinatra or Elvis rose to fame. He transformed radio, revolutionized recording, and built a legacy that seemed untouchable. But behind that warm smile and holiday charm hid a life far darker than anyone suspected. After his death in 1977, shocking revelations from inside his own family shattered the image of the perfect legend, exposing scandals, heartbreak, and accusations that still haunt his legacy today. How did the beloved King of Christmas become one of the most controversial figures of Hollywood's golden age? And why do some now call him an evil actor? Stay with us as we uncover the hidden truth about Bing Crosby, the story the world was never meant to hear. Born in Tacoma, Washington in 1903, Crosby was the fourth of 7 children. His love of music showed early. At just 6 years old, he was already captivated by recordings thanks to his very first phonograph. He grew up in a normal, middle-class home, but by the time he reached college, he abandoned plans to become a lawyer and instead chased a dream of performing. By 1930, he landed his first film role in King of Jazz, and soon after launched a radio show that drew as many as 50 million listeners at its peak. But behind the staggering success, Crosby's personal life was far more troubled. The public saw the clean-cut superstar who delivered nearly 300 hit singles, yet the man himself, intensely private and guarded, lived a life marked by hardship, tension, and secrets the world would only learn after his death. Did laryngitis help or hinder Bing Crosby's career? In the mid-1920s, Bing Crosby launched his career performing with a trio called the Rhythm Boys. It was during these early years that his love for jazz really emerged. He became known for his playful scat singing and relaxed, jazz-infused phrasing, a style so distinct that by the early 1930s, imitators were everywhere. As one musician joked, all the singers tried to be Crosbys. You were either a high Crosby or a low Crosby. But just as Crosby was rising to the top, a serious setback threatened to end everything: laryngitis. Early recordings from the 20s and 30s reveal a noticeable hoarseness, the first hint of vocal strain. In 1931, he developed a node on one of his vocal cords. Doctors urged him to rest, but Crosby pushed on, continuing to perform and drink heavily, which only worsened the damage. By the mid-1930s, his voice had permanently changed. He lost many of his higher notes and moved away from the jazz-driven scat style that first made him stand out. Instead, he shifted towards smooth, intimate ballads that resonated with mainstream audiences. This evolution turned him into the voice of the nation. But while it made him a superstar, his growing fame came with a cost, one that would follow him into his personal life. A fire destroyed 13 years of marriage. Bing Crosby's early career wasn't just marked by rising fame, it was also a time of deep romance. As the Los Angeles Times notes, he met Dixie Lee in 1929, when she was already gaining attention as a young actress at Fox Studios. They married a year later, on September 29, 1930, and Dixie stepped away from her film career to start a family with him. By 1936, they had settled into a sprawling 4-acre estate in Toluca Lake, Los Angeles, where they raised their 4 sons. But in 1943, disaster struck. A devastating fire tore through their home, destroying nearly everything the couple had collected over 13 years of marriage. According to the New York Times, the blaze erupted in early January, while Dixie and the children were taking down Christmas decorations. A short circuit in the tree set off the fire. The damage was immense, wiping out Crosby's horse racing and golf trophies, as well as his treasured collection of musical recordings. Amid the devastation, Crosby managed to save one surprising item: a charred sports shoe pulled from the ruins of his dressing room. Inside, untouched by the flames, was $2,000 in cash from race winnings, a tiny stroke of luck in an otherwise heartbreaking loss. Dixie Lee was an alcoholic. Although Dixie Lee had once been a performer herself, her relationship with fame was far more complicated and far more painful than Bing Crosby's. As described in Bing Crosby, Crooner of the Century, she didn't step away from the spotlight just to support her husband's career. She withdrew because she genuinely felt uncomfortable in front of a camera or an audience. But stepping out of Hollywood didn't solve everything. Gary Crosby later wrote in his memoir, Going My Own Way, that his mother was someone who needed constant reassurance and affection, words Bing struggled to express. She often avoided accompanying him to movie sets or social events, and Gary believed the isolation only deepened her loneliness, especially with Bing working so much. While Bing eventually overcame his own issues with alcohol after marrying her, Dixie tragically went in the opposite direction. In the 2014 PBS documentary American Masters, Bing Crosby Rediscovered, Mary Crosby recalled how her mother's drinking worsened over time. "It got so that she didn't leave the house," she said. "She would pass out, and the kids would come home and find her on the floor." It was an experience, she added, that left lasting scars on everyone in the family. His twin sons may have suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome. Tragically, Dixie Lee's struggle with alcohol didn't just affect her, it left deep marks on her children as well. Beyond the emotional turmoil her addiction caused within the family, it also had serious physical consequences for her twin sons, Dennis and Philip Crosby. According to American Masters, Bing Crosby Rediscovered, both boys were victims of fetal alcohol syndrome, a condition that wasn't widely understood or discussed at the time. This meant neither Bing nor Dixie fully recognized what their sons were facing or how to help them. Director Robert Trachtenberg told People that he showed photos of the twins to USC specialists who immediately recognized the signs, distinctive changes to the skull, nose, and facial structure. They said, "Yes, this is a textbook case of fetal alcohol syndrome," Trachtenberg recalled. As adults, all four of the Crosby sons from Bing and Dixie's marriage battled alcoholism. Dennis's struggle eventually became too heavy to bear. He took his own life at 56. At his memorial, his brother Gary offered a heartbreaking reflection. "When my mother died, I saw the light go out of his eyes. As far as I'm concerned, he's been trying to get back to her ever since." Bing Crosby was an absentee father. Because Bing Crosby began building a family with Dixie Lee at the same time his career exploded, he was rarely home. He later acknowledged this himself. In a 1977 interview with Barbara Walters, he admitted, "When the four boys were growing up, I was very busy, making 3 or 4 pictures a year, doing the radio show, recording, and they were in boarding schools." On top of that, Crosby carried a deep fear that his children would turn into the stereotypical Hollywood kids. Gary Crosby once recalled, "He always said he didn't want any Hollywood kids in the house. He was frightened to death that we were going to become what he imagined rich kids were." But that fear only created distance, pushing the boys further away rather than keeping them grounded. It wasn't until Bing's second marriage to Katharine Grant that he seemed to become more involved as a father. His youngest son, Nathaniel, later told The Express, "As far as raising kids, he didn't have a clue. I can't say what happened with my father's first family. I believe he had more time to spend with us as his career was less of a priority later in life." Was Bing Crosby a dysfunctional father, too? For most of his career, Bing Crosby projected an image of warmth and effortless charm. Everyone in the world was in love with Bing Crosby, his second wife, Katharine Crosby, recalled in American Masters. Bing Crosby Rediscovered. And if you weren't among his admirers, you likely saw him as an ultra-square pop crooner, as the Baltimore Sun once put it. Either way, the public agreed on one thing. Bing Crosby seemed harmless. That perception collapsed after his death. In 1983, his eldest son, Gary Crosby, released a memoir titled Going My Own Way, accusing Bing of harsh and sometimes abusive behavior at home. As American Masters noted, the book forever tarnished the public's perception of Crosby. Gary's brother Philip disputed the severity of the allegations, but Gary never backed down. In 1987, he shared a devastating reflection. "I don't remember a time when terror, bewilderment, anxiety, and despair weren't on my shoulders constantly." According to the Baltimore Sun, while other entertainers, like Elvis Presley, who died the same year, went on to enjoy a powerful posthumous revival, Bing Crosby's legacy did not. Instead, Gary's revelations cut him off at the knees, leaving his once towering public image permanently shaken. His son, Lindsey Crosby, may have hated him. When Gary Crosby released his explosive memoir, Going My Own Way, in 1983, Bing Crosby was no longer alive to see the fallout. But the reaction became even more shocking when Gary's brother Lindsey publicly supported the claims. As people reported, Lindsey's agreement surprised many, since he had often been considered Bing's favorite son. Even while the boys were adults, Bing tried, sometimes clumsily, to keep them on track. American Masters, Bing Crosby Rediscovered, noted that during Lindsey's battles with depression and alcoholism, Bing even considered having him placed in a psychiatric hospital because he feared for his son's safety. "There were decades of cleanup," Bing's daughter Mary Crosby recalled in the documentary, referring to the emotional aftermath that lingered within the family. Sadly, Lindsey never found stability, either during his father's lifetime or after Bing's death in 1977. In December 1989, he ended his life after learning that his inheritance had run out. A representative for Gary told the Los Angeles Times that Lindsey had long struggled with alcoholism, depression, and the strain of living under the shadow of his famous father. Bing Crosby lost the love of his life. After years of loneliness and a long struggle with alcohol, Dixie Lee was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in June 1952 at just 40 years old. Even more heartbreaking was the fact that Bing Crosby wasn't by her side when she died later that year. According to American Masters, Bing Crosby Rediscovered, her doctors chose not to tell her the cancer was terminal, and Bing left for Paris to begin filming, partly to avoid raising suspicion about how serious her condition truly was. Bing's fame didn't grant him dignity or privacy when it mattered most. At Dixie's funeral, the scene was overwhelming. "It was a freaking circus," Gary Crosby recalled in an archival interview describing the swarm of photographers. "Through it all, it was like he was alone." Ironically, her death briefly brought the fractured family closer. As people summarized from Gary's memoir, Going My Own Way, Dixie's passing created a rare moment of togetherness. For Bing, however, grief remained something he refused to share publicly. He was once quoted saying, "I will never talk about my grief at losing her. I believe grief is the most private emotion a human being can have, and I'm going to keep mine that way." Bing Crosby almost had an early death. As time passed and music evolved, Bing Crosby was no longer Hollywood's biggest draw. Rock and roll reshaped the industry, and younger stars like Elvis Presley and the Beatles took center stage. As pop cult, religion, and popular music notes, Elvis became the first true rock superstar, worshipped by teens and criticized by adults who found him too sexual, a sharp contrast to Crosby's clean-cut traditional image. Even so, Bing remained widely respected by both fans and fellow performers, though not by everyone. David Bowie once admitted that he agreed to appear in a 1977 Christmas TV special with Crosby only because my mother loves Bing Crosby. That same year, the industry honored Bing with a live televised event marking his 50 years in show business. But the celebration took a frightening turn. In his early 70s at the time, Crosby slipped off the stage after his performance, grabbing a piece of scenery to break his fall. He ruptured a disc and was unable to stand or walk for more than a month. "It should have killed him," his daughter Mary Crosby told American Masters. Bing Crosby Rediscovered. "It didn't," but it should have. Bing Crosby never ended up telling his sons he loved them. When Gary Crosby published his explosive memoir in 1983, he painted a harsh picture of the home he and his brothers grew up in. Although some relatives, including Bing Crosby's brother, Bob, and Gary's younger brother, Philip, disputed the accusations, one point was difficult to ignore. Bing struggled to show emotion. Even Barbara Walters noted this in her 1977 interview with him, telling viewers that many people saw a man who finds it very hard to give or receive emotion. Bing brushed off the criticism, describing himself as just a surface fella, but his second wife, Catherine, confirmed his emotional reserve. In American Masters, Bing Crosby rediscovered, she recalled a moment when their son Harry was 4 years old. He started shaking hands with Harry. I said, "What are you doing? You hug him." Her gentle nudging never really changed him. That emotional distance was still present on the day Bing died of a heart attack while golfing in October 1977. His youngest son, Nathaniel, later told The Express that he was with his father during those final moments. His last words weren't particularly memorable, Nathaniel said. Even then, Bing didn't tell him he loved him. Instead, his final remark was simply, "That was a great game of golf, fellas." Has White Christmas overshadowed Bing Crosby's legacy? Over the course of his long career, Bing Crosby recorded an astonishing 1,200 songs. As American Masters, Bing Crosby Rediscovered points out, he sang almost every style imaginable: hymns, spirituals, Hawaiian melodies, Irish ballads, French chansons, light opera, even early R&B. But nothing ever matched the success of his most famous track, the holiday standard, White Christmas. Crosby first recorded the song in May 1942, and the Belleville News-Democrat later estimated its global sales at around 50 million copies. By 1955, it had earned a spot in the very first Guinness Book of World Records as the best-selling single of all time, and it held that title for decades. Still, some argue that this one song ended up overshadowing the rest of his extraordinary career. Record producer Ken Barnes put it bluntly in American Masters. History doesn't see Bing as a trailblazer. History sees him as the guy who comes out every year and sings White Christmas. In a 1977 interview, Barbara Walters asked Crosby whether he had grown tired of performing the song. "No, I could never be sick of it," he replied, before adding with a shy smile, "I just fear that people would be sick of it." If he were alive today, he'd probably be comforted to know that the world still plays and treasures his most enduring gift every December. Now we want to hear from you. After learning the hidden truths behind his family life and career, do you see Bing Crosby differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.